may ka dhiganta qobashada munaasabada sanad guuradii 20th ee Alaf Maay marshay in korreeytii munaasabadan wali baa dhiiday bili Febraayo sanadii 2014 muuqaalka koowaad wali baa ka arag doontana dood cilmiyeed ka dhiidi magaalada Toronto taasoo linka dabal digay sanad guuradan 20th ee Alaf Maay qaybta koowaad waa Dr. Maxamed Xaaji Mukhtaar oo ka jawaabow su'aal hayti maadaama kulanka ka saabsinya amuuro Soomaaliyeed dadka in isku kooyana badanyin Soomaali may kulanka lanka adeegsado way afka Soomaaliga waliba uu seeray maadaama Soomaaliya in iska hayna dhamaantana ee Soomaalida qurbo ka dhalatina afaf shil gadisan baradan waliba door binay in una luqadda Ingiriisiga ee nagada korta af dhaxdhaxaad ee uu adeegsanantay dararta munaasabada tan kala su'aal lahanjeedii yana hayti toon muuqata qaar waliba haayana af maxaatiri qaarna af maay qaarna af Ingiriisi waa waliba la ka hadalaya dadka munaasabada ka qayb galaan iyo waliba iyo in iska jiraan ama muuqdaan ahaano ku dowhayan luqadaha maayka maxaatiriga iyo af Ingiriisiga
and they are very constructive waqtay yani marka qaarkood yani comments qaarna waa destructive kuwana waa constructive marka waa run maartay yani audience-ga laga yaa af Soomaaliga yani Dr. Gitana wuxuu soo jeedinay man af Soomaali ku sheegno yani waxa ka soo bixi karaya in sidii Shariif oo hadda af Soomaali baan ku hadlayaa buu markaas af Soomaaligiisa wax kale uu noqday xoogay Dr. Gitana af Soomaali buu ku hadlayaa af Soomaaligiisa dhinaca baa la aadinaya laba af Soomaali marka waxa laga yaabaa halka inay ka soo baxdo gabadhays anigoo af dabaran ku hadlaya af Soomaaliga baan ugu badanaya marka waxaan isku dayaynay kaliya af kale oo isu kayn soo dhaweyn karaayo waan tolerance-gi oo ka sheekeynay ninkii saaxiibkay ahaa ka joogay we have to tolerate mogtay some way in the middle meelna isku nimaadno isku fahmi kareen mogtay yani ujeedo kale runtii meeshan laga ma lahayn waxay ahayd kaliya afkeeba isu kay soo dhaweyn karaayo hadii aan maanta uma jeedo dhalinyarada oo halkan ku dhalatay oo Soomaalida ah waxa laga yaabaa afafkan aan sheegnay xataa inaysan si fiican wax u fahmi kareen way u baahnaanayaan in Ingiriis wax lagu sheego ama Faransiis lagu sheego way iskuulkay tagayaan af Soomaali lagu ma dhigo mogtay it's very good point wax meesha ku jiro weeye insha Allah waxa weeye waa isku dayaynaa inaan Dr. Gitana waa turjumaan oo ahaan jiray mala inaan turjumaan u baahnan hadda loo baahnaan bidda Shariifka oo ka dhawaajiyay oo ah ii sheeg maxaaga markii la qoray arrin buu sheegay oo macquul ah oo gudiga Soomaaliga probably dahaba wax nooga sheegi karta barkay ayada ku jirtay oo naga weeday gabadhaani waxay ahayd gudoomiyaha akademiyada dhaqanka ay ahaan jirtay way ka warqabtaa yani sharciyada gudiga Soomaaliga mesela waa jirta in la yiri eray bixintu mesela eray bixin markaan sameeynayno hadii aan weyno eray af maxaaga hadaan ku weyno seebaan yeelnaa ba ila iga taqaan runtii waxa dhici karta dhaliilo inay jiraan oo la yiri oo la ignore gareey oo fiicnaan lahayd hadii af maxaaga laga waayo in la yiraahdo mesela bal kuwa iyaga kale aan eegno af maayga ma laga heli karaa eraygaas afka jiidada ma laga heli karaa afka tunnida ma laga heli karaa afka lama dhihin baa meesha laga yaabo inay ku jirto oo la yiri hadii laga waayo afka maxaaga aynu aadno afafka ajnabiga marka dahaba maybe you can enlighten something
maytaadu waxaan u sheegayaa in la isticmaalay laatiinka oo aan far kale la isticmaalin waxa sababtu ahayd inaan far kale oo teknolojiya aan ku qorno afkeena aan lahaynin oo aanan lahayn xataa muxuu ahaa typewriter ma aanan haysan makiinada ma haysanin wuxuu dhan waxay ku habaysnaayeen wixii jiray oo dhan markaas oo technique ah waxay ku habaysnaayeen laatiinka farta laatiinka marka saas daraadeed baa ka dhigtay dan in la qaato wixii noo suuragelinaya in farteena la qoro ile Ismaaniyada anigu waagan yaraa la igu soo bilaabay oo waligay wax aan u arday oo ahaan jiray oo Yaasiin iyo maartay iyo xirsi magan iyo ardaydooda ahaan jiray waxaan ku khasbanaanay inaan ogolaano muxuu ahaa ii sheegay farlaatiinka sababtoo ah keeri ma soconayn ma shaqaynayn wixii aan ku shaqaynayn ma qaadan kartid adiga dan baad leedahay waxaan ku shaqaynahayn ma isticmaali kartid wixii ku shaqaynahay waa in isticmaal waa in maskaxdaada isticmaashaa iyo dantaada marka saas keentay in muxuu ahaa ilaa laatiinka la qaato laatiinku ilaa teknolojiyo dhan buu ku fadhiyaa taas waa inaad garataan waa kaan
أنا waxaan maleynayaa hal mid waan xileenaa baan maleynayaa waqtiga laakiin mid yar baan ku dari lahaa waxa weey even markii la qoray hadii la yiraahdo mesela ereyga qoraxda iriibaan erey kalaan leenahay oo lagu daro la yidhaha intaasoo erey baa jirta oo la accommodate karaya wax badan bay tari lahay ilaan waynu naqaanaa maalan ereyo badan oo ingiriisku imika iyo faransiisku ay wada leeyihiin baa jira oo markaad leedahay road iyo la yidhaha cunid magacaasi intaasoo micna buu leeyahay yani oo la indicate karayo wax badan bay fudaydin lahay sida uu mukhtaar u sheegayo vowelska iyo waxaa meel kaliya ama ereyada jira in la accommodate karayn lahaa haddii la sheegi lahaa dictionary-ga intaasoo erey baanu leenahay ereyga oo markaa la accommodate karayo kuwa kale wax badan bay tari lahay
waliba xiga doctor casaneli oo kudowahow waayo aragnimadiis markii uu cilmi baaris ku suubi gobolada koonfureed ee Soomaaliya xilliga maamulkii militariga sida Langoldowi afmayga doctor casaneli waliba uu ku nuxnuxsaday faa'iidada afka mayga in lita taariikhda guud haaneed iyo tangeeska Afrika oo dhan gaar ahaan hodannimada afka mayga weelo korta erey biyowka afafka geeska Afrika sida cimilada xoolaha daawada ilaha shilgadisan ee dhaqaalaha ee lanka helo kora ama lanka helo korna afka maxaatiriga iyo tilaabooyin walkoole walkoole mustaqbalka cilmi baarowka afafka iyo taariikhaha geeska Afrika.
If they know a second language, it might be English or French, but not Italian. So we lose a lot of the perspective that the Italians who spent 50, 60 years ruling that part of the country, what they left us. That's one thing. When international organizations began to operate in Somalia after independence, they relied heavily on the writings of I.M. Lewis and other English language observers. And there were organizations like FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, and USAID did some important studies in the region of inter-riverine area, because that was a big economic area to be developed in the 1960s. You can find a lot of writing about land tenure and social structure and agricultural traditions and so on in the inter-riverine region, but not very much about culture and about Alaf Maay, the language. These were very specialized studies on the economy. That was put together by the Academy of Sciences, I think, in the United States, and it was supposed to accompany a team of technical experts who were going to the Juba Valley to predict what the effects of the Bardera Dam would be on the local people in the area. Because as many of you know, the farmers of the middle and lower Juba, many of them practice dishek agriculture, the flood recession agriculture. And the idea was they're going to be affected. If a dam is built to control the floodwaters, what will happen? So the study was supposed to be an environmental and social impact study. This was done in 1985 or 86. As you know, the dam was never built because the state collapsed. But the idea was to do a thorough study, and the World Bank and the German aid was going to assist and build this dam. My job was to be the cultural advisor, because I had done research in the South. I was supposed to remind members of the technical team that the people in the South, along the Juba in particular, some of them Somali Bantus and some other Maay speakers, weren't the same. They didn't speak the same language as the rest of Somalia. But of course, almost all of the Somalis on that team, who were the guides and the translators, they were all Maha speakers, right? So when they were asking the farmers, what's going to happen if we flood this, they couldn't understand the answers. They didn't know what these guys were saying, right? So the point of this, even though I told them, I think you're not really understanding what the local farmers think about agriculture and what they see as the best solution for the periodic flooding or lack of water that they get. It's not just the language and culture that has been marginalized, but even the views of my speakers about development. What's the best path to development? What's the best way to move forward? I don't think people, they weren't consulted. They weren't brought into the international organizations and establishment that were talking about how do we develop. Now, this was a Siad Barre plan, to build the dam, and everyone accused him of wanting to help his own kinsmen and so on. But still, the example of going into the field to try to get local people's opinions about their techniques of agriculture and how they'd be affected and what they thought what they recommended they needed most. And in fact, what I heard they needed most were just hard-top roads from the Juba Valley. They said, we don't need a dam, we don't need a big project, we just need roads that we can use to carry our crops to market in the rainy season. Otherwise, we get stuck and we can't get our stuff out. That was a very simple request. But of course, international aid and the Siad government, everybody wanted to build a big, prestigious project that would help the clan and help the electricity in Mogadishu and so on. But listening to the local people, that wasn't there because no one heard the Alaf Maay voices. So that was one example, just from my limited experience, of just what everyone's been talking about. The other thing is, when I first went out to do field work for the book, I went to the Ministry of Education, and to my great fortune, the person who was there to help me was Musa Galal. Everyone knows Musa Galal, an Isak guy, but one who really understood. He just said, I don't know Maay at all, but I know if you're going to work with the Odes, the Lashins, the historians in the South, you've got to have Maay. You have to have someone who knows Maay. He knew that, even though his own work was in the Mahad, poetry and Gabay and history and folklore and culture. So we had to look around very hard in the Ministry of Culture and Higher Education to find someone who could help me identify local students and put me in touch, and who was trusted by people in Afgoya and Dafet and Shalom Bode, because I was trying to collect the history of people along the lower Shabelle at the time. So that's another example where, at the time, the presence of Alaf Maay speakers in the official educational ministries of the government was very small, very, very small. Some of the same limitations that many academic organizations do, and especially the Somali ones. Can I just say what they are, just as a friendly outsider? The tendency for Somalis from whatever region to look inward, to study primarily issues that in their own communities, and to want to only hear about their problems, nobody else's. Maybe we don't have the luxury, but that's one of the things that, whether it's not just Alaf Maay, it's everybody. The Puntland people and the Isak, everybody's doing the same thing. The second thing is the tendency to see scholarship primarily as a tool of politics. That scholarship is not about the evidence, it's about how it can help my cause. Everyone wants to do that. So sometimes, if, for example, the theory, the linguistic evidence shows us that Somalis probably originated in the Horn of Africa. They didn't come from Arabia. But if you're someone with political Islam as your agenda, you'll say, well, I don't care what the evidence says. We know that we're Arabs because it's our politics today, right? So you know this happens many, many times, that if the historical evidence disagrees or seems to challenge your views, then you forget the historical evidence. If it supports it, you grab it and say, yes, we were here for a long time, or we're the first people here, or whatever. So that's a tendency we have to fight against, I think, if we're going to convince the international community that we're not just politicians and activists, that we are scholars with a lot to contribute to the study of the Horn of Africa, not just to Somalia. And third, I think there's a tendency of whatever language, of Somalis from whatever language group, the third problem, the third issue of limitations sometimes of organizations is a tendency of Somalis, no matter what language group they belong to think about Somalia in isolation, as a separate, Somalia is not part of African studies. I teach African history, and sometimes the Somalis, say, no, we got our own, we're unique, we're not African. Ethiopians say the same thing, right? And so both of those fields sometimes get left out. But the Maay in particular, the history of Maay, seems to me to be so connected and have so many things to contribute to the history of Eastern Africa and Northeastern Africa. The linguistic evidence, for example, talks about the peopling of the whole of the region. Very important. The fact that dialect replaced Arabic and replaced even Swahili in Merka and Mogadishu, even though there were pockets of Swahili speakers. This will tell historians of the East African coast a lot about the history of the East African people's interaction with the Indian Ocean world. We have a very rich vocabulary, I know in Maay, even though I don't know Maay very well, I've seen in vocabulary related to the environment, related to agricultural practices and herding practices and digging wars and land tenure. all of these things should be collected, this vocabulary of professional expertise. Medicine, very important stuff that can contribute to other scholars who are studying medical traditions or technology traditions or land management traditions all over the region. Because as you know, the Alaf Maay economies are much more like the rest of East Africa, mixed herding and livestock. That's true all over Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda. People do both, livestock and agriculture. Whereas the northern the Somalis of Lewis are pastoralists, and that's sort of the exception, not the rule. So by studying Alaf Maay, we are studying an economy in a region that is shared with many more of our East African neighbors. And so historians and linguists and agricultural experts can find, I think, there lots of interesting, rich data. But we need people who can do this. We need people who can begin to collect, get our young people to start thinking about these unique contributions. The final example, of course, is the cultural and linguistic diversity that Nu has talked about. You have communities of Oromo and Bantu origins and all sorts of people who have been absorbed and mixed together, and it's a much more cosmopolitan kind of culture. That's a lot of lessons to be learned there about the Horn of Africa, living cross-culturally in general. So my point is that I think my history, my culture has lessons to teach for African history more generally. Thing I wanted to say, just one more point here, is that I already mentioned the point about scientific vocabulary. I think we do need to start collecting and publishing material that has content. It's not just about politics or advocating. We've been left out, we want to get back in. Why do we want to get back in? Because we have things to say about history, about technology, about agriculture, about religion, about whatever it is. In my, there's a lot of things to be transmitted. And that's why I celebrate, even though I give you guys some advice about not becoming too provincial or too narrow-minded, you have to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Alaf Maay, because language is by far, the best way to kind of preserve and hand on to our next generation the heritage and the culture and the knowledge of our communities. We have to do that. And I think if we do it in writing and we pay some attention, not just to my speakers, but to the rest of the Somali speakers and to the rest of the Africanist community and to the rest of the world that cares about languages and minorities and multiculturalism, I think we have a lot to teach the whole world.
Dr. Tani waliba uu ka warramay way aragnimadii uu saaqaadii degmada waajid gobolka Bakool ee maamulka Koonfur Galbeed. Dr. Tani waliba waa dhakhtar fahmi waayay dhibanayaasha oo baahdi turjumaan waliba yaab leh in dhaqaatiirtu ruushka ka shaqeeyaan isbitaalka qaaxada Alaf Maay la bari antaas yana ankoy Soomaaliya aan onaha ka galin jabi jaamacadda Xamar وانا لها إنك عربينا سدي أن نداوي لها الصومالي ذن كدو هانا أفكار محاتريقا.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Nabade. Was it Nabade? Nabade.
Mahadallah.
I was invited to this conference by Professor Mukhtar, whom I knew for a long time, a man that I admire for his scholarship, for his decency and for his objectivity and for his integrity. As a matter of fact, I have to say that the Maay people are very lucky to have an intellectual as composed as Dr. Mukhtar is. I don't think other Somalis do have someone who is as balanced and as composed as him as an intellectual. Saying that, I don't consider myself a scholar. I consider myself an activist. One of the causes that I actively promote is the cause of Somaliland. And one of my friends, when I was coming to this conference, asked me, how come you are going to a celebration of my script and my language? You're a Somalilander. I told him that long before the birth of Somaliland. And long before that, I have questioned the myth that Somalia is only one country. I was advocating the cause of the Maay people to own their culture, that their language be written, that they have the right to be served by their language in government offices, that they have a right that their language be taught in their schools, and they have got the right to hear their language from the radio. And before I questioned the idea of one Somalia, I questioned the idea of one language. And I came to know that that was a myth long before. Here in Toronto, in 1992, me and Mukhtar were members of a group called the Ergada, which was comprised of all, I think, Somali intellectuals in North America and even far beyond. And in May 1992, we had a big conference in here, and about 20 of us came here, and we had a preliminary discussion. At that time, it was 1 million people were dying in Baidava, and the news was dominated by what at that time we thought was a famine, but later on came to know that it was a genocide. And the question arises about my language, and I was advocating that Mai is a different language from the Somali that we know. And everybody in the among our 20 in the Ergada, probably except for Mukhtar, who was not participating in the discussion, was against it and was saying, "You're just talking nonsense." At the end of the discussion, Mukhtar joined the discussion and supported me, and I thank him for that. Mukhtar invited me today to relate to you the stories that I was telling my friends these days, and how I came to the conclusion that the Mai language is a different Somali from the Somali language that we know. When I finished the medical college in 1978, late 1978, I was transferred to Wajid. There is a big Russian-built hospital there, and there is a clinic in the middle of the town, and I had to deal with my patients for the first time in my life. I was not expecting that I will be transferred to a place in Somalia where I will not understand my patients and my patients will not understand me. It was a dilemma and it was a shock to me. Nothing has ever prepared for me the shock that I went to when I went to Wajid. In medicine, we are not veterinarians. We have to talk to people. And it's called the subjective examination. You ask the patient what's wrong with him. Yeah. What he's complaining from. What's his name? Where he was born. What diseases he had before. So you have to communicate with him. So I remember the first day that I went to the clinic, an old man came from the interior. And before I tell you this story, that my idea of the Mai language was an idea given to me in Mogadishu and the people in this, other parts of the South. What they told me is that the Mai people have got a way of distorting Somali when they don't want you to understand them. But they will understand whatever you say. That was the idea that I had. And it's a prevalent idea among the Somalis until now. Whenever I talk about these things, yeah. They tell you, they understand you. You don't understand them. They know how to, make you, and they understand. And when my patients came to me, the old man from the interior, the first thing I asked was, what's your name? Maga'a. He wouldn't understand. Then the nurse came to me, said, so there's a different way of saying Maga'a melere. Melere. Because the old man didn't understand what I was talking about. He just says, Then I asked him, halkee ku xanuunaysaa? He wouldn't understand. And the nurse came to my rescue in Tekaduriaise. And after that, it was through the translation. The woman nurse, was a little angry with me. Because before me, there were Russian doctors. And the Russian doctors knew some rudimentary Mai. They were trained for some, to know some Mai back in Russia when they were coming to watch it. But nothing in my training in Somali University, gave me the tools to be a doctor in my region. While the Russians were training their doctors in Moscow to know Mai, or to respond to Mai. So the nurse thought that I was just like the Russians. She thought it was part of the medical education to know Mai. And later on, I befriended, as a matter of fact, I befriended some my young people who were teachers and government clerks in the area. I related my stories to them, and they opened it up to me that there is a big oppression, that there's a government scheme to suppress the Mai language. One of them was one of 5 who were put in prison in Baidala. Because when the Somali script was written, he and 5 of his friends made pamphlets translating the Hiddiqta October into Mai and using the same Latin script and distributing. Despite the fact that they were distributing government propaganda, they were put in prison because the government didn't want them to write this Mai language into a paper. So all the time after they told me that in the earlier colonial times there were radio programs in Mai. They told me that one few songs by Hassan Adan Samata were put in Radio Mogadishu in Mai. The government issued that there will not be no more Mai songs in the radio. So from that moment onwards, I was actively supporting the idea of the Mai people having the right to own their language, to write their language, and to be officially served in their language, and to be taught in schools in there. Professor Mukhtar, when I came to know him, has told me many things, more than that. And one other thing is, in the clinic, in the hospital in Wajid, it was not serving the Mai people only. It was serving also the people in Ethiopia who come from Ethiopia, Somali people who come from Ethiopia. It had a large tuberculosis in a department. Tuberculosis usually is a disease of malnutrition, and it does not affect the Mai people because they have both agrarian products and livestock products. They even have chicken. But people who live outside in the borders, in the Ogaden, who subsist only on camel milk, are very malnutritioned, and they had the the propagation of this disease, the TB, they used to come to this hospital to be cured. As a matter of fact, as the things progressed, it was easier for me to deal with my patients rather than the patients from the Ogaden, which I can't understand what they are talking about, because the attitude was much different. And the Mai people were polite people who listen to you, who respect you as a human being, and you get an attachment with them. Well, the nomad from Ogaden, he just heard that there is an X-ray machine in the hospital, and he has in his mind that if he goes under an X-ray, that he will be cured. He doesn't understand that X-ray is for diagnosis, not for cure. And he just wants the X-ray and just go back to his camels. It usually and he won't accept anything that you tell.
It wasn't long after that he left. I didn't go to that meeting. Syed Sheikh Samatar wrote a big piece on that, remember, about Somalia should stay away. I remember it was a big controversy within the association about whether Mogadishu should host that conference in 1989, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah, thanks.
Amazingly, thank you. You were right on the money. Just got back from Somalia beginning of this year, March, and I spent like about nearly 6-7 months. And in my stay in Somalia, I learned that I keep hearing people of Digimilifli being minority. I think they're the majority of Somalia today. You know what I mean? Because I want all the cities that I went, they're the majority. Unfortunately, there is a harsh reality on the ground, which is poverty. And I think the most extreme poverty, I think, suffered by the people of Digimilifli, quite frankly. And I think Dr. Tani, I think Tani spoke so profound of all the ones, and I think if we are to heal, I think if we are to move forward, I think we need to have the conversations that we have today. I think we need to have dialogue. I think for us to move forward, the best revenge that we can do is success. The best revenge is not revenge. I think the best way to learn from each other, I think it's through humility. And we have a lot of each other. I think in the past we had very ugly and narratives, and I think the only way moving forward, I think to really change our lives and our homes. And I think it starts with fathers and mothers. Then we can produce a better society.
maadaama laga daawanayo idaacadaha meel walba markii aad tiri waajid waxaan jeclaan lahaa Somali University ay ii gargarayso inaan la dilgareeyo dadkayga oo operation kana lagu soo baray Russia
ka sheekeynayay mar kii aan jaamacadda xamar aan ka baxay oo dhakhtarnimada ee la ii bedelay waajid dadku waxa ay ku hadlaan Alaf Maay anu isma lahayn meel ay Soomaali joogto oo aan adigu fahmaynin waxa ay leeyihiin iyaguna aanay ku fahmaynin waxa aad leedahay ayaad ka shaqayn doontaa. Nothing in my life noloshayda I berbergareeyay ma jirin, marka dhibaato ayaa inaan iga qabsatay. Waxaan xasuustaa markii ugu horeysay aan maxaan ku dhahdaa clinic aan fadhiistay oday daaba ii soo galay oo xanuunsanaya. Odaygii waxaan weydiiyey kulley dhakhtarku waxaa la yidhaahdaa subjective examination baa la yidhaahdaa si xanuunka sida loo qaado horta patientkaad wareysanaysaa dabeedna markaa ka bacdi baad baadhid u galaysaa inaad dhegaysato iyo inaad gargaraacdo iyo inaad markaa fahmi waaye. waxaan xasuustaa odaygii waxaan ku idhi magaca u garan waaye magaca ihi marhaba ayuu dhahdaa waan gartay inaanu fahmayn gabadhii neerstahayd baanu yeedhay way iga turjubaantay. There's another way of saying in my it's called magaca melere. dabeed su'aashii xigtay aan weydiiyey waxay noqotay halkee ku xanuunaysaa. odaygii uu garan waayey because uu garan waayo waxaan ku hadlayo. gabadhii neerstii baa markii dambe haddana safe garaysay intay ka dhowriyaysay halkaa wixii ka dambeeyay waxay noqotay inay turjubaan ay ii noqoto intii ka dambeysay inay ii turjubaanto. gabadha neersta clinic fadhida waxay arki jirtay dhakhaatiirtii ruushka ahayd way yaqaaneen su'aalaha ugu horeeyay sida loo weydiiyo jawaabahana way fahmayeen waayo 6 bilood ayaa iyagoo ruush jooga afmayga marka ay imanayaan weejid ayaa la soo bari jiray in ay ku filan oo ay kula communicate gareeyaan patientka. laakiin aniga jaamicadii xamar cidina iima soo dhigin marka aan tago meel afmay lagaga hadlayo waxaan ku idhahdii si aan ugu jawaabo.
baarliin xasan oo taageeraysa fikradda Dr. Mukhtaar waliba ertay waa in CV-yaalka ka darsatan dadka ka saayan afmayga iyo afmaxaatiriga. baarliin waliba kala kulan la qeybsatay way aragnimadii mar hay'adda qaxootiga sheenasa America ka eedsay in iyo turjuman pamphlet ka saabsan sharciyada hay'adda iyo sida aan la tacaamulayan qaxootiga ku dawahayaan afka mayka ama Alaf Maay.
أنا سرمة مفردة له محمد مختار حالي وينين شيء ويري هدي أبا of my kasasa put in your resume and I'm going to tell you a story about that. 2000 either 1999 end of 1999 2000 a company contacted me and they want that I have to translate the first book of the refugee orientation markiyo koyen for the Somali Bantu. Allah yarrahma in Abdirshid Sheikh Ahmed was in Virginia with me. And I'm sorry, Dr. Kasanila, I will be shifting back and forth so you will understand the Somali and the English, both of them. And they asked me if I can translate the whole book for the translation and then also do a script and also do an override voice. So you're going to see white people but speaking of my. Isn't that really wonderful that you will see white people who are talking of mine? So we did that. I talked to Abdirshid Allah Yarhma. I said, would you like to do this with me? Because I need a male voice that was going to do the voice right, the override. And I will do the whole translation. I said, okay, I will do it. But that time I was going on vacation. So immediately I didn't tell them that I will take the project. I said, I'm going on a vacation. When I come back, I will do it. And they said, no, we really need right now. So I lost it. I thought that I lost it. I said, I can't leave without my, I have to go my vacation already. I have my ticket. I left. I've been away for like a month. I come back. Still, they couldn't find anyone who's going to do it. Probably there was a lot of people, but they didn't have good sources that how they're going to find the people who will do it, the translation. I come back and they said, still we couldn't find someone. Would you like to do? I said, okay, now I will do. I'm back, but I didn't negotiate with them. They said, how much, whatever they give me, I just said, well, give me, it's my language, so I'm going to promote. But these guys, they were getting, the contractors, they were getting huge money on my head, and I really didn't know that. So I did it for 4 months. It was a Ramadan, and I was fasting, and I didn't know going studio and talking all night long, cut, stop, start it, cut it. The timing is not. And I was really, so Abdirshid, he said, well, Barlin, this is not going to work. I'm not going to do it. So I told them, I said, I couldn't say, because I already said, okay, I will do it, this much money. So I said, and I blamed on Abdirshid, Allah Rahmah, and I said, this guy, he said he's going to quit if you don't give him, and there's no anyone who's going to fill his position. So they write another contract and we get a good money, and we started doing. Since that time, I write my resume at the bottom, languages I speak of my and Maha. And now even I get more contracts from DOD, from any other language places that I translate, that I do even curriculum these days, small curriculum, that it's not a big one. So don't you just think that the Alaf Maay, it's still beginning. I mean, I understand that there is the nya, that my little, I can say she's like my daughter, all last night, you know, all these professors and doctors, they were talking about the language. I didn't do it that because I really didn't know myself how I'm going to put like the nyanyur and all this. So the challenge was I translated the book. Who's going to review it? Because somebody has to check it. They're not going to take it whatever I did it, and they're not going to say, okay, here's the book. Now they have to get another hand, somebody who is going to read the whole thing and see it, whether it's correct or not. And look, so it says butter, sugar, milk. I did it, when I translated, there was a way I did it, and it came back and they said, well, you put dice. It's not dice, it's subuk. Somebody else translated again. And they said, but that person, he didn't born, he didn't study there, he was not, the other person who was looking what my work. So he said, they returned it back and they said, with a small red line, and they said, what is dice? So I said, dice, subuk, yeah, kor. And I just did it again, a red one, and I put dice. And then they called me, and I went their office, and they said, okay, we're going all through this. We give this document someone, and they really read thoroughly, and this dice, it doesn't exist. And I said, I want to see that person. I want to see that person. And they said, well, this person, he's not even the country here. I mean, they're communicating somebody somewhere else. And I said, okay, we can go and we can ask 4 or 5 other people who know the language. So dice is dice. I talked to my mother and she said, you're right. And I said, this is it, dice is dice. So they left dice. But to make it short, Dr. Mukhtar, when he said, write it down, so please do it if you speak the language. If you speak the Maay, it's really hot. You can make money. Just what I do these days as a,
intaasiyaha ku koobana muuqaalkan kooban dhawna ka fiiriyana xogtiyo amuraha ka saabsan 20 sano guuradii ha ku wareegtay markii ku horreeytay la qobadi munaasabad lanka dabaal degow farta Alaf Maay ee Haiti bili Febraayo 2014 walana la qobaday magaalada Toronto ee wadanka Canada iyo meelo badan oo kamid ah dalalka adduunka iyo Soomaaliya